Jason and the Argonauts. The throne of Iolcus was a prize taken by cunning, and King Peleus sat on it with the restless suspicion of a man who knew he did not truly own it. In the echoing stone halls of his palace, his dreams twisted into nightmares. Always the same, a man with one sandal standing before him, the bringer of his end. The oracle at Delphi had spoken without pity. "Beware the man with one shoe," she had said, and her voice had slithered into Peleus's mind like smoke. Since that day, fear gnawed at his bones more than age ever could. Peleus had heard many prophecies in his life. Most he could ignore, crush, or bribe into silence. But this one clung to him. It seemed simple, a single man to watch for. Yet the simplicity made it dangerous. Anyone could be the threat. In secret chambers, he consulted priests, sorcerers, spies. He sacrificed bulls, goats, even doves, staining the altars red in hopes the gods would change their will. Still, the prophecy clung to him, a vulture over his shoulder. His half-brother Aeson, the rightful king, had been quietly disposed of years ago. Some whispered that Aeson's child had survived, hidden, spirited away by loyalists. Peleus could never find proof, but in the dead hours of night, when even the bravest guards kept to their fires, Peleus lay awake, haunted by the thought that blood would find blood. He became a man obsessed. Every traveller to Iolcus was scrutinized. Every beggar, every noble, every sailor. Yet no man had appeared with only one sandal. Seers said fate was a river. You could dam it, divert it, but you could never dry it. Peleus tried anyway. He tightened his grip on the city, crushed dissent, filled his dungeons. Better a cruel king than a dead one, he told himself. In the marketplace, the people spoke of the prophecy in low voices. In taverns, old men grumbled that the gods would not be cheated forever. In the fields, mothers warned their children to beware of strange men missing a shoe. But Peleus would not be undone by whispers or omens. When a festival honoring Poseidon was announced, he saw his chance. A gathering, perfect for seeing everyone at once. If the threat was real, it would come to him. Under a sky burning with summer heat, the citizens of Iolcus filled the grand square. Jugglers tossed flaming torches. Musicians played shrill songs on lyres. Fishermen offered glistening catches. Priests processed with heavy incense. And Peleus, robed in purple and gold, sat on his high throne, eyes scanning the crowd with a predator's patience. He almost missed it. A young man, tall and strong, shoulders broad from travel, pushed through the crowd. He wore no sandals, only one. His other foot was bare, bleeding slightly from the hot stones of the square. Peleus's heart hammered. He felt the prophecy clench around his throat like a noose. The man knelt before the king, head bowed. Dust clung to his cloak. Sweat streaked his brow. He looked up, and his eyes were clear and fearless. "I am Jason, son of Aeson," he said, voice steady. "I have come to claim my birthright." The square fell silent. Peleus masked his fear with a politician's smile. "And what is it you seek, young man?" "The throne of Iolcus," Jason said simply. Behind the king, the guards shifted, hands tightening on spears. Around the square, whispers hissed like snakes. Peleus felt the world tilt. Fate had not been avoided, only delayed. And now it stood before him, wearing a single sandal. But Peleus was not without cunning. "A noble ambition," he said slowly, leaning forward. "Yet such prizes must be earned. Prove yourself worthy, and I shall step aside." Jason frowned. "How shall I prove it?" Peleus's smile sharpened. "There is a prize fit for a king," he said. "Retrieve for me the Golden Fleece, which hangs in the sacred grove of Colchis, guarded by gods and monsters. Bring it here, and I will grant you your throne." The challenge hung in the air, heavy and impossible. Jason, young and proud, saw not the trap but the opportunity. He bowed low. "I will bring it," he vowed. Peleus nodded, hiding his triumph behind a mask of generosity. Let the boy chase a myth to his death. But deep in his gut, the king felt no true relief. Prophecies had a way of twisting. What he had begun could not be undone. As Jason left the square to prepare for his quest, Peleus watched him go, one sandal flapping against the stones. Fate had entered his city, and there would be no peace until it was fulfilled. Jason's journey to Iolcus had been long, and the roads had not been kind. Dust coated his skin, and his single sandal was worn thin. Yet as he approached the gates of the city, his spirit burned bright. This was the moment he had trained for, the moment that had been whispered to him since boyhood, a destiny promised and a wrong to be righted. The guards at the gate laughed when they saw him. "A hero with one shoe," one jeered. "Perhaps you lost the other fighting monsters, eh?" Jason smiled and said nothing. He understood mockery. He had grown up with it, hidden away under the care of the centaur Chiron, far from royal courts and soft beds. What mattered was not how he appeared now, but what he would become. Inside Iolcus, the city bustled with life. Merchants shouted from colourful stalls. Children ran laughing through narrow streets. The scent of roasted meat and sea air hung heavy. Yet Jason noticed the tension behind the laughter, the way conversations halted at the sight of soldiers, the wary glances cast toward the palace that loomed over the city like a watching god. He made his way to the town square where a herald stood on a platform, announcing the upcoming festival of Poseidon. A chance to meet the king, Jason thought. A chance to claim what was his. As he moved through the crowd, an old woman stumbled in his path, her basket of figs spilling across the cobblestones. Without hesitation, Jason bent to help her, gathering the fruit and offering his hand. She looked up at him with strange, knowing eyes. "Thank you, boy," she rasped. "May the gods favor your quest." Jason shivered but pressed on. The day of the festival came. Jason stood among throngs of people in the grand square, his heart hammering against his ribs. Banners whipped in the breeze, the priests intoned blessings. Then Peleus appeared, carried on a gilded litter, his robe a blinding sheen of purple. Jason felt the weight of fate settle onto his shoulders. As the crowd parted, he stepped forward, one sandal scraping against the stones. Gasps and whispers filled the air like smoke. Peleus's eyes locked onto him. Jason saw the recognition there, the flash of fear quickly masked by a practiced smile. When Jason knelt before the king and spoke his name, a ripple of astonishment ran through the people. Peleus's voice was smooth as oil as he spoke, but Jason could hear the tremor beneath it. He listened carefully to the king's challenge, retrieve the Golden Fleece. An impossible task, they said, a death sentence dressed as an honor. Jason rose, unshaken. He bowed once more and declared, "I will bring it back." The city buzzed with disbelief and awe as he left the square. He knew he would need allies, a ship, and a plan. But first and foremost, he needed courage, the kind that could face monsters, kings, and gods alike. Jason smiled to himself as he disappeared into the crowd. The first step was taken. The wheel of fate was turning. Jason knew he needed a ship unlike any before it, fast, strong, and blessed by the gods. Word spread quickly through Iolcus of his quest, and soon the greatest shipwright in Greece, Argus, sought him out. "You need a ship to sail to the edges of the world," Argus said, his beard matted with sawdust. "You'll need the favor of Athena herself." Jason clasped his hand without hesitation. "Then let us build it together." They chose a sacred grove near the sea to begin their work. Mighty oaks, ancient and whispering with divine power, were felled for the keel. It was said that Athena herself guided Jason's hand when he struck the first blow against the timber. Each night, Jason dreamt of the ship, its long, sleek form cutting through dark waters, its figurehead alive with the voice of prophecy. He awoke with fire in his veins and labored alongside Argus until his hands bled. The townsfolk watched in awe as the Argo rose from the earth, a vessel of legend taking form before their eyes. Her prow was carved into the image of Hera, and the timbers hummed with the blessings of the gods. One evening, as the setting sun turned the sea to molten gold, Athena herself appeared, cloaked in grey and crowned with a gleaming helm. "You seek the fleece, son of Aeson," she said. "You will need more than mortal strength." She placed her hand upon the prow, and the wood shivered, coming to life. The figurehead would speak and guide them, whispering secrets of the journey ahead. "Name your ship," Athena commanded. "Argo," Jason said, without thinking, honoring the craftsman who had shaped her. Athena nodded, her face unreadable. "Then go forth, Jason of Iolcus. Gather your heroes. Fill the sea with the song of your oars." And just as suddenly, she was gone. Argus bowed low, and Jason felt the burden of destiny settle heavier upon him. The ship was ready. Now he needed a crew bold enough to ride her into legend. The next chapter of his journey waited beyond the horizon. The Argo sat gleaming at the dock, her new timbers golden in the sun. But she could not sail alone. Jason knew it would take more than strength to claim the Golden Fleece. It would take heroes of legend, ones who could face gods and monsters and survive. Jason sent word across Greece, to palaces of kings, to the remote huts of hunters, to the halls of warriors. His call was carried by messengers, by birds, by the whispers of the wind itself. He called for the boldest, the strongest, the swiftest, and the most cunning to join him. They answered. First came Hercules, towering and scarred, a lion's pelt draped over his massive shoulders. His laugh rumbled like distant thunder as he clasped Jason's hand. "A good quest," he said, his voice deep and rich. "Perhaps it will be enough to tire even me." Next came Orpheus, slight and wiry, carrying a lyre that could charm rivers from their beds and lull wild beasts to sleep. "You will need music to tame the hearts of gods and monsters," he said, with a sly smile that hinted at deeper knowledge. Atalanta arrived soon after, swift and fierce, bows slung across her back and a quiver full of deadly arrows at her hip. She bristled at the skeptical glances of the men, but held her head high. Her reputation, the swiftest runner, the deadliest huntress, travelled ahead of her like a sudden gust of wind. Castor and Pollux, the twin sons of Zeus, pledged themselves to the voyage. Castor, a master horseman, and Pollux, whose fist could fell bulls, stood as equals, their loyalty to each other unwavering. Zet and Calais, winged sons of the north wind, swept down from the high mountains, their feet barely touching the ground. Their laughter was sharp and wild, like winter gales. Others gathered, Meleager, famed for slaying the great Caledonian boar, Argus, the brilliant builder of the Argo herself, Peleus, future father of Achilles, Idmon, the seer who read omens in the flight of birds, and many more, each a legend in their own right. They gathered on the beach as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of crimson and gold. The waves lapped at the shore, murmuring secrets. Jason stood before them, feeling the weight of their gaze and the immensity of the task ahead. "This journey will not be easy," Jason said, his voice steady. "We seek the Golden Fleece, a prize guarded by magic, by monsters, and by kings who fear strangers. We will cross seas where no ship has sailed. We will face dangers that few have survived. Some of us may not return." The heroes listened in silence, their faces grim but determined. Then Hercules threw back his head and laughed, a sound like a crack of thunder. "What are we waiting for? Let us sail." A cheer rose up, fierce and wild. Swords flashed in the dying light. Oaths were sworn upon sacred altars. Sacrifices of oxen and sheep were made, the smoke rising in dark spirals to the heavens. Wine flowed freely, toasting courage, friendship, and the gods' favor. As the fires burned low, Jason and the heroes gathered around the Argo, touching her timbers, feeling the pulse of life within. Her figurehead whispered encouragements, prophecies, warnings, words only the bravest dared listen to. Jason felt a fierce pride swell in his chest. With these heroes at his side, he could face anything: the wrath of gods, the rage of monsters, even the doom of prophecy. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the last stars still clung to the sky, Jason stood alone at the prow, staring into the dark sea. He knew that once they sailed, there would be no turning back. Ahead lay glory or death, and either would be remembered. And so, in the morning, as the first light broke across the waves, the Argonauts prepared to set out, bound together by fate, by honor, and by a hunger for the impossible. Dawn broke with a fire in the sky, and the Argo rocked gently in the harbor, ready to sever her ties to land. Jason stood on the deck, looking back at the city of Iolcus. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and the palace loomed atop its hill, silent and indifferent. He wondered if Peleus watched from some dark window, already counting the days until Jason's bones would wash ashore. The heroes gathered, each carrying the bare essentials: weapons, provisions, talismans blessed by priests. Orpheus tuned his lyre, its notes flitting like birds into the waking air. Hercules hoisted heavy barrels into the hold as if they weighed nothing. Atalanta tested the string of her bow, her eyes sharp as the hawk circling overhead. The townsfolk came to the shore, drawn by curiosity and hope. Some cheered. Others crossed themselves and whispered prayers. Mothers lifted children onto their shoulders to glimpse the legends about to set sail. Old men muttered about omens, about the folly of tempting the gods. A priest in white robes came forward, bearing an offering, a black ram to Poseidon. The ram was sacrificed on a stone altar hastily erected by the dock. Blood spilled into the sea, and the waves churned briefly as if the gods stirred. Jason raised his arms high. "O Poseidon, lord of the sea, Hera, queen of the heavens, Athena, shield of heroes, watch over us as we seek the Golden Fleece." The crew repeated the prayer, their voices rising like the tide. With the rites completed, the Argonauts filed aboard. Argus barked orders, and the men sprang to their tasks. Oars were set, sails unfurled. The figurehead, carved by Athena's own hand, seemed to breathe, its wooden eyes gleaming in the morning light. Jason took the tiller, his hand steady. He did not look back again. The dockhands pushed the Argo free, and the ship slid into deeper water. The oars dipped in unison, and the Argo moved like a living thing, slicing through the surf. A great cheer rose from the crowd, and flowers were thrown into the sea, floating like bright stars upon the waves. The journey had begun. The coastline of Iolcus shrank behind them. Hills turned into green smudges. The palace became a pinprick of pale stone. The open sea stretched out before them, vast and unknowable. Orpheus played a song to steady their hearts, a song of heroes past, of battles fought and won. The oars found a rhythm to match the music. Even the most seasoned warriors felt a thrill of fear and wonder. They were leaving the known world behind. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, burning the mist from the water. Dolphins raced alongside the Argo, leaping joyously from crest to crest. The wind filled the sails, and the Argo surged forward. Jason paced the deck, exchanging words with his crew. Idmon the seer muttered of favourable omens, the flight of birds, the shape of the clouds. Zeds and Calais, the winged sons of Boreas, scouted ahead, their sharp eyes searching for obstacles. By nightfall, the coast was gone entirely. Only water and sky remained. The Argonauts gathered around small fires in iron braziers set safely on deck. They ate, sang, and spoke of the challenges ahead, the clashing rocks, the harpies, the dragon that guarded the Golden Fleece. "No monster can match us," Hercules boasted, raising a heavy goblet. "Not with this crew." Jason smiled, but he felt the heavy weight of leadership settle deeper on his shoulders. These men and women had trusted him with their lives. He could not afford failure. As the stars ignited above them, Jason stood at the prow once more. The night wind ruffled his hair. Somewhere ahead, across leagues of dangerous water, lay Colchis and the Fleece. The gods had heard their prayer. Now they would see if they answered. After days of swift sailing under clear skies, the Argo sighted land, an island green and rich with vineyards and fields of barley. Smoke rose from small fires scattered across the hills, and white-walled villages clung to the shores. It was Lemnos, the sailors said, but something was wrong. No men lined the docks. No shouts greeted the arrival of the Argo. Only women, silent and watchful, stood waiting. Jason brought the ship to harbour carefully. The heroes disembarked, wary and armed. As they stepped onto the sandy shore, a woman in rich robes approached. She was tall and proud, with dark hair braided in gold. Her eyes held both sorrow and strength. "I am Hypsipyle, Queen of Lemnos," she said. "We welcome you, strangers." Jason bowed respectfully. "We come in peace." Hypsipyle smiled thinly. "You will find no war here, only women who rule themselves." At a signal, the women brought gifts: wine, fruit, soft robes. The Argonauts accepted cautiously, watching for any sign of trickery. But the women showed no weapons, only open hands. Over feasts of roasted lamb and sweet cakes, Hypsipyle told their tale. Their husbands had long ago neglected them, preferring foreign slaves over their own wives. In anger and despair, the women of Lemnos had risen up and slaughtered every man. Now they ruled alone, fearing the day when outsiders would come to conquer or enslave them. Jason listened, heart heavy. He understood pride and vengeance, but he also sensed danger. Desire lingered in the air, thick and cloying. Some of his men, weary of the sea and seduced by easy comforts, began to lose their edge. Atalanta warned Jason in private, "We must not linger. This island is a trap of softness. We were not meant to become part of their sorrow. Still, nights passed in revelry. Some Argonauts took lovers among the women of Lemnos, bonds formed that even oaths to gods could not easily break. Jason resisted. His mind remained on the quest, on the fleece glinting somewhere across endless waters. Hypsipyle, clever and sharp, saw his resolve and admired it. She asked him to stay, to rule beside her. Together, they could rebuild Lemnos into a kingdom of strength. Jason was tempted, if only for a moment. But destiny does not wait. At dawn, when the mists still clung to the sea, Jason called his crew to the Argo. Some came reluctantly, kissing their lovers goodbye. Others, like Hercules and Atalanta, came eagerly, eager to sail once more toward glory. Hypsipyle stood on the shore, her face unreadable, as the Argo slipped away from Lemnos. Jason watched her until the island was no more than a blur against the horizon. The wind rose, filling the sails. The quest continued. The Argo sailed eastward under a bright, relentless sun. The sea gleamed like a polished shield, but beyond the horizon, a dark shape loomed. Bear Mountain, a crag of jagged stone jutting from the ocean like a broken spear. As they neared, the winds died, and the waters grew eerily still. A heavy, suffocating silence settled over the ship. Even the seabirds disappeared, as if the island itself drove away all living things. The Argo drifted toward a narrow bay, framed by black cliffs that rose like walls to block out the sky. Jason peered up at the mountain and saw figures moving against the rock, huge, lumbering shapes. Earthborn giants, Idmon the seer whispered, his face pale. Children of the deep earth, older than men, fierce as beasts. Jason called a council. We cannot sail around. The winds will not carry us. We must pass through the bay. The heroes readied themselves grimly. They stripped down for speed, donned armor where they could, and sharpened blades and spears. Even Orpheus tightened the strings of his lyre, for music could be as potent a weapon as steel. The Argo slipped into the bay like a ghost. The cliffs loomed over them, shutting out the sun. Shadows thickened on the deck. A chill, unnatural for the season, settled over the ship. Then came the roar, a deep, bone-rattling bellow that shook the very stones. From the caves above, the giants hurled boulders the size of oxen. They crashed into the water with thunderous splashes, sending geysers spraying high. The Argo pitched and rolled violently, wood groaning under the assault. "Row!" Jason shouted. "Row for your lives!" The Argonauts bent to their oars with desperate strength. Muscles burned, veins stood out in their arms. Hercules stood at the prow, catching smaller stones on his shield and hurling them back with deadly force. Atalanta loosed arrow after arrow into the cliffs, her shots unerring even as the ship rocked. One giant, enraged beyond reason, waded into the water, each step sending tremors through the bay. His arms were thick as tree trunks, his body covered in bristling hair, his eyes burning with mindless fury. Jason seized a javelin from a rack and hurled it with all his might. The spear whistled through the air and struck the giant's throat. With a roar that split the air, the creature toppled, sending waves crashing over the Argo's deck. Another giant, larger than the first, leapt down from the cliffs, landing with a quake that cracked the rocky shore. Pollux sprang forward, fists flashing like lightning. The giant reeled under the furious blows, blood streaming from his broken nose. Yet more giants appeared, looming at the cliff edges. Their voices rose in a cacophony of rage, and a second barrage of stones hurtled down. Shields were splintered, oars snapped. Idmon narrowly dodged a rock that would have crushed him flat. "Push through," Jason bellowed, voice hoarse. The Argonauts rode with renewed fury, the sea now boiling with the impact of falling stones. Sweat streamed down their faces, mingling with blood and seawater. The figurehead of the Argo seemed to lean forward, urging them onward with a silent cry. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, they burst free of the bay. Open water spread out before them, endless and wild. Behind them, the giants bellowed in frustration, their deep cries rolling across the water like thunder. The Argonauts collapsed onto the deck, bruised, bloodied, but alive. They had survived the passage of Bear Mountain, a feat few would ever believe. Jason stood at the tiller, hands steady, jaw set. Around him, the battered heroes began to recover, binding wounds, straightening broken equipment, murmuring prayers to the gods. "This," Jason said grimly, "is only the beginning." Ahead, the sea stretched wide and wild, its mysteries and dangers waiting like unseen predators. The sea was restless, the waves chopping at the Argo's hull like impatient hands. Dark clouds swirled on the horizon, and a sharp wind carried the cries of unseen creatures. Jason stood at the prow, the salt sting biting his face, scanning for the island Idmon had seen in his dreams. "Land ahead," shouted Zetes, pointing to a rocky speck rising from the frothing sea. As the Argo approached, a fetid smell met them, a mix of rot, damp earth, and something fouler. The island was barren save for a broken temple at its center, its stones blackened by time and neglect. At the temple's foot, they found him. A man hunched on a stone, his hair matted and his robes tattered. His eyes were milky white, blind yet sharp. Phineus, the cursed seer. "You have come," he rasped. "The gods send you." Before Jason could answer, a shriek split the air. From the dark clouds above, they descended. The harpies. Winged monsters with women's faces twisted in rage, their talons sharp as daggers. They swooped down, tearing at Phineus's meager meal of bread and meat. The old man cried out in despair, shielding his face. The Argonauts sprang into action. "Drive them off," Jason ordered. Zetes and Calais, sons of the north wind, leapt into the air. Their feathered cloaks unfurled, and they rose like falcons, meeting the harpies in the stormy sky. Blade met claw, and the air filled with shrieks of rage and pain. On the ground, Hercules swung his club at the descending beasts, sending one crashing into the broken temple stones. Atalanta loosed arrows with deadly precision, each shaft finding its mark in the leathery wings of the monsters. Orpheus plucked a harsh chord on his lyre, a sound so piercing that the harpies faltered in their flight, clawing at their ears. Phineus, sobbing with gratitude, clutched at Jason's tunic. "End this torment." Zetes and Calais chased the harpies beyond the island's cliffs, hounding them until they vanished into the swirling clouds. The sky grew lighter, and the stench lessened. Phineus slumped, exhausted but relieved. "I am in your debt," he whispered, "and I will pay it." Jason knelt beside him. "Tell us what you know." Phineus spoke of Colchis, of the trials awaiting them, the deadly Symplegades, the clashing rocks that smash ships to splinters, the sleepless dragon guarding the Golden Fleece, the treacherous King Ates, who would never yield it willingly. "You will need cunning, strength, and the favor of the gods," Phineus said. "Without them, you will not return." He gave them a final gift, a warning and a strategy. "Send a bird through the clashing rocks first. If it passes, so may you." Jason thanked him and left offerings at the ruined temple, gifts for the gods who had spared them. With the harpies driven off and Phineus's counsel gained, the Argonauts returned to the Argo. The sea seemed calmer now, the path ahead clearer, but no less dangerous. They sailed once more into the unknown, fate pulling them onward like an invisible current. The sea grew darker as the Argo pressed on, the water shifting from bright turquoise to a heavy, ominous grey. A steady wind whipped foam from the waves, and a strange stillness settled over the crew. Ahead, the Symplegades waited, the clashing rocks, deadly sentinels of the strait that guarded the way to Colchis. Two colossal cliffs, black as obsidian and slick with centuries of seawater, loomed up on either side of a narrow channel. Every few moments, with a roar like thunder, they smashed together, grinding stone against stone with brutal force. The heroes stared in awe and terror. Between the cliffs, the water frothed and boiled, churned by the violence of the stones. Jason remembered Phineus's words. A bird must test the way first. He turned to the crew. "Bring the dove." Argus brought forth a small, trembling dove, white as snow, cradled gently in his rough hands. Jason took it carefully, feeling the rapid beat of its heart beneath his fingers. He set it free. The dove soared forward, wings flashing. The cliffs began to rumble. The bird darted through just as the rocks slammed together, clipping a few tail feathers, but escaping into the open sky beyond. Hope flared. "Now," Jason roared. "Row with all your strength." The Argonauts bent to the oars, muscles straining. The Argo shot forward, slicing the water, racing toward the narrow gap. The cliffs began to move again, drawn inexorably together. "Faster!" shouted Hercules, his mighty arms driving the oars like pistons. The Argo entered the strait. The noise was deafening, a grinding shriek that shook the very bones of the ship. Spray drenched the crew. The rocks loomed high above, poised to crush them. Inch by inch, the Argo fought through, the oars churning foam. The heroes shouted encouragement to each other, teeth gritted, backs arched with effort. The prow cleared the gap. Then, with a roar, the cliffs began to close. Jason seized the tiller, yanking hard to steer the ship through. The stern scraped the rocks with a shriek of tortured wood. Splinters flew. The figurehead groaned as if in pain. But the Argo burst free. Behind them, the cliffs slammed shut with a force that sent shockwaves across the sea. For a moment, there was silence. Then a cheer rose up from the crew, wild and triumphant. They had survived the Symplegades. The rocks, having been bested once, now stood still, tamed forever by the Argo's daring. Jason leaned against the tiller, exhausted but victorious. Ahead lay open water, and beyond it, Colchis. The greatest trials were yet to come. The open sea stretched ahead, vast and blue, but Jason's mind was fixed on the distant shore where destiny waited. Days passed in uneasy calm. Then, one morning, the cry went up. Land. Colchis. The city gleamed at the edge of the world, its golden towers rising above thick forests and winding rivers. A palace of polished stone and gilded domes caught the sunlight, dazzling the eyes. The river faces curled around the city like a protective serpent. The Argo glided into the wide mouth of the river. Jason ordered the sails furled and the oars shipped. The ship floated slowly forward, her prow slicing the mist. On the banks, people gathered. Warriors clad in bronze armor, priests in flowing robes, and farmers in rough tunics. All eyes were drawn to the strange ship and her foreign crew. At the heart of the city, beyond high walls and bronze gates, lay the prize they had come for, the Golden Fleece, hanging in a sacred grove, guarded by a sleepless dragon and dark magic. Jason gathered the Argonauts. "We must be cautious," he said. "Colchis is a land of laws and sorcery. Their king, Aeetes, is proud and cruel. He will not part with the fleece willingly." They moored the Argo at a secluded bend in the river. Jason, Hercules, and a handful of others set out to seek audience with the king. The city was a wonder of sights and sounds. Markets overflowed with spices, jewels, and strange beasts. Shrines to forgotten gods dotted the streets. The people spoke a tongue Jason barely understood, harsh and musical. At the palace gates, guards barred their path. Jason spoke with careful humility, presenting himself as a prince from distant lands, seeking only friendship and the chance to behold the wonders of Colchis. The guards relented and led them into the palace, a marvel of carved stone and hanging gardens. Golden statues of beasts lined the halls, lions, bulls, and serpents, all with eyes of glittering gemstones. King Aeetes sat on a throne of ivory and gold, his robes heavy with embroidery, his crown a mass of twisted gold wires. His eyes, cold and cunning, weighed Jason like a butcher considering a prize lamb. "You come seeking what, strangers?" Aeetes said, his voice low and dangerous. Jason bowed. "Peace, trade, and perhaps, if it please the king, a chance to behold the Golden Fleece, of which we have heard tales even across the wide seas." Aeetes' lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. "The fleece is not a trinket to be paraded before foreigners," he said. "If you desire it, you must prove yourselves worthy." Jason's heart tightened. He had expected this. "Name your test," he said. Aeetes leaned forward, his gold bracelets clinking. "Yoke the fire-breathing bulls of Ares, plough a field with them, then sow the field with dragon's teeth, and defeat what springs from the earth." A gasp ran through the assembled courtiers. Jason bowed again, hiding the chill in his veins. "It shall be done." As they were led away to prepare, Jason caught sight of a woman standing at the edge of the throne room, dark-haired, proud, her eyes shadowed with sadness and power. Medea. He did not yet know it, but his fate and hers had already begun to intertwine. The open sea stretched ahead, vast and blue, but Jason's mind was fixed on the distant shore where destiny waited. Days passed in uneasy calm. Then, one morning, the cry went up, "Land!" Colchis. The city gleamed at the edge of the world, its golden towers rising above thick forests and winding rivers. A palace of polished stone and gilded domes caught the sunlight, dazzling the eyes. The river faces curled around the city like a protective serpent, winding through fertile fields where farmers in colourful robes tended crops with curved bronze tools. The Argo glided into the wide mouth of the river. Jason ordered the sails furled and the oars shipped. The ship floated slowly forward, her prow slicing the mist that clung to the water like ghostly fingers. On the banks, people gathered, warriors clad in bronze armour, priests in flowing robes inscribed with ancient runes, and farmers in rough tunics. Traders and artisans craned their necks to catch a glimpse of the strange ship with its golden prow and foreign heroes. At the heart of the city, beyond high walls and bronze gates adorned with carvings of griffins and serpents, lay the prize they had come for, the Golden Fleece, hanging in a sacred grove, guarded by a sleepless dragon and woven into the very soul of Colchis. Jason gathered the Argonauts on deck. "We must be cautious," he said. "Colchis is a land ruled by laws written in magic and blood. Their king, Aeetes, is proud, cunning, and cruel. He will not part with the fleece willingly. They moored the Argo at a secluded bend in the river under a stand of whispering reeds. Jason, Hercules, Orpheus, and a handful of others set out to seek an audience with the king, donning their finest cloaks and bearing gifts of silver and woven cloth. The city was a wonder of sights and sounds. Markets overflowed with baskets of spices, saffron, cinnamon, myrrh, and stalls groaned under heaps of emeralds and rubies. Strange beasts, caged and chained, snarled at passers-by. Shrines to forgotten gods dotted the avenues, each tended by solemn priests burning sweet incense. The people spoke a tongue Jason barely understood, harsh, musical, and swift. Children stared at the Argonauts with wide, curious eyes. Street performers juggled flaming torches, and beggars cried for alms. At the palace gates, towering warriors blocked the way, bronze shields flashing in the sun. Jason spoke with careful humility, presenting himself as a prince from distant lands, seeking only friendship and the chance to behold the wonders of mighty Colchis. After tense murmurs and a long wait, the guards relented. They led the Argonauts into the palace, a marvel of carved stone and hanging gardens that smelled of roses and jasmine. Golden statues of lions, bulls, and serpents lined the marble halls, their jeweled eyes seeming to follow the newcomers' every step. King Ates sat on a throne of ivory and hammered gold, the heavy folds of his embroidered robes cascading to the floor. His crown was a mass of twisted gold wires, and his dark eyes, cold and cunning, weighed Jason like a butcher assessing a prize lamb. "You come seeking what, strangers?" Ates said, his voice low and dangerous, echoing off the stone walls. Jason bowed low, his heart pounding. Peace, trade, and perhaps, if it pleased the king, a chance to behold the Golden Fleece, of which we have heard wondrous tales even across the wide seas. Ates' lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer, a glint of amusement flashing across his face. "The fleece is not a trinket to be paraded before foreigners," he said. "It is sacred, a gift of the gods. If you desire it, you must prove yourselves worthy through deeds, not words." Jason's heart tightened, but he showed no fear. "Name your test," he said, his voice steady. Ates leaned forward, his golden bracelets clinking together like the chiming of a death knell. "You must yoke the fire-breathing bulls of Ares, plough a field with them, a field cursed and hardened to stone. Then sow the field with dragon's teeth, and defeat what springs from the earth." A gasp ran through the assembled courtiers. Even the guards shifted uneasily. Jason bowed again, hiding the chill that raced down his spine. "It shall be done," he said, committing the words to fate. As they were led away to prepare, Jason caught sight of a woman standing alone at the edge of the throne room. Dark-haired, proud, and radiant. Her robe shimmered like midnight, and her eyes held shadows of sadness and power beyond mortal reckoning. Medea. Jason's gaze locked with hers for a brief moment. Something unspoken passed between them. A warning, a promise, a beginning. He did not yet know it, but his fate and hers had already begun to intertwine, as tightly as the threads of a spider's web. The dawn over Colchis was sharp and red, a blade slicing the mist that clung to the earth. Jason stood in the courtyard of Ates' palace, armor gleaming in the early light, his mind steady, his heart pounding. Around him, the heroes of the Argo tightened straps, checked weapons, exchanged grim nods. Today, words would not win them the fleece, only blood and strength. The fire-breathing bulls of Ares were penned in a stone corral at the edge of the city, visible even from the palace walls. Creatures of living bronze, their nostrils poured smoke, and sparks danced in their breath. Their hooves cracked the earth where they stamped, and the sound of their roaring rolled through the fields like thunder. Jason knew no mortal could tame such beasts unaided. That night, as the city slept, Medea came to him, her cloak pulled low, her voice urgent and low. "You cannot survive this without aid," she said. In her hand she held a vial, a thick golden liquid that shimmered even in the dim torchlight. "An ointment," she whispered, "distilled from secret herbs and the ichor of sacred serpents. Rub it on your skin and armor, and for one day no fire nor blade will harm you." Jason hesitated, but saw no other path. He took the vial, and for a moment their fingers brushed. A jolt ran through him, a silent pact forged. "Why help me?" he asked. Medea's eyes were dark, unreadable, because fate binds us both now. At dawn, Jason stood before the corral, shining like a figure cut from the sun itself. King Eight sat on a raised dais, courtiers gathered like vultures around him, eager for blood. The gates were flung open, the bulls charged. Jason met them head on, the earth trembling beneath their fury. Flames licked at his body but left no mark, the ointment holding firm. He seized the first by its horns, its breath searing his face, and wrestled it down by sheer will and brute force. Muscles strained against enchanted metal. With a roar, Jason forced the yoke upon it, iron snapping shut around its neck. The second bull gored the ground, churning up sprays of stone, and lunged. Jason sidestepped with a warrior's grace, grabbing its snorting head and slamming it to the earth. Dust rose in choking clouds as he yoked the second beast. A stunned silence fell over the spectators. Even Aetes's smug mask faltered. But the trial was not over. Jason took the plough, heavy and blackened by flame, and drove the bulls forward. Their hooves tore into the cursed field, a wasteland of stone and ash. Behind him, the plough cut deep furrows, smoking with the heat of the beast's breath. When the field was ploughed, attendants brought forth a bronze helm filled with dragon's teeth, seeds of death. Jason scattered them across the soil. Almost instantly, the ground heaved and cracked. From the torn earth, armed warriors clawed their way into the light, an army of men born of stone and magic, full-grown and full of bloodlust. Jason remembered Medea's second counsel. Cast a stone among them. He snatched up a jagged rock and hurled it into the midst of the rising warriors. Confused, they turned on each other, each believing himself attacked by his neighbor. Blades flashed, shields splintered, war cries filled the air. Jason watched grimly as the earthborn soldiers slaughtered each other in a frenzy. When the last of them fell, blood steaming on the scorched ground, only Jason remained standing, chest heaving, sweat soaking his tunic. The field lay silent. Death had reaped its due. Aetes rose from his throne, his face carved in fury. The trial had been set to kill the foreigner, to humiliate him. Instead, Jason had triumphed, and the court could not deny it. Jason bowed stiffly, eyes locked with the king's. "I have completed the task set before me," he said. "Now honor your word." Aetes smiled, cold, thin, dangerous. "We shall see," he said. "The night is young." Jason knew then. Aetes would never surrender the fleece willingly. Trickery and bloodshed still lay ahead. But the first battle was won. And Medea watched him from the shadows, her face unreadable, her heart already shifting from loyalty to her father, toward a fate she could not yet name. Night thickened over Colchis. The palace gleamed like a fallen star, torches burning along its high walls. Inside, tension twisted through the marble halls, Jason's triumph had shaken the court. Aetes whispered with his captains, plotting betrayal. Medea moved like a shadow through the corridors, unseen, unheard. She knew her father's mind. Jason would not see another dawn if he remained. Guards would come for him while he slept, blades ready to spill foreign blood in the name of honor. She stood at a crossroads, her heart torn between two worlds. Loyalty to her father, her land, her gods, or the wild, reckless pull she felt toward Jason, the stranger who had battled fire and earth for a prize he had not yet touched, who had met every challenge not with cruelty, but with a clear, fierce purpose. The gods watched. The fates hovered, scissors poised. Medea's hand trembled as she gathered her potions and charms, slipping them into a small leather pouch. Her nurse, old Iphino, caught her at the door. "Child," the old woman whispered, "the path you walk will stain your soul." Medea looked away. "It is already stained." She found Jason in the guest wing, armor laid aside, only a short sword by his cot. His face was turned to the open window, where stars blinked coldly. "You should not be here," Jason said, sensing her before he saw her. "Nor should you," Medea answered. He rose, wary but unafraid. "What do you want?" Medea stepped closer, her voice low and fierce. "To save your life, to save mine." She told him everything, the plots, the soldiers, the noose tightening around his neck. Jason listened, tension coiling in his shoulders. "We can still escape," Medea said, "but only with the fleece. Without it, your quest is nothing. Your people's hopes die." Jason looked at her, truly looked, past the veil of sorcery and fear. In her eyes, he saw not only danger, but also courage, a soul as storm-tossed as his own. "Help me," he said. "Come with me." Medea's breath caught. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to the space between them. She nodded. "Tonight," she whispered, "in the grove. Meet me there." She slipped away into the dark before he could answer, her heart hammering, her fate sealed. In her private shrine, she knelt before Hecate, goddess of crossroads and witchcraft. She lit black candles and spoke forbidden prayers, asking not for forgiveness but for strength. The fleece called, Jason called, and Medea, daughter of Aetes, priestess of the old gods, chose betrayal, love, and the sharp, burning path that led into legend. The sacred grove of Ares lay in silence, heavy with mist and the scent of iron and pine. Pale moonlight filtered through twisted branches, casting jagged shadows across the forest floor. In the center, hanging from an ancient oak, the golden fleece shimmered like a captured star, its surface alive with rippling light. Jason crouched beside Medea at the edge of the clearing. The others waited back at the Argo, ready to sail at the first signal. Here, it was just the two of them, the hero and the sorceress, against the ancient magic of Colchis. At the base of the tree coiled the guardian, an immense serpent, black as night, its scales edged with a venomous green sheen. It did not sleep. It never slept. Medea pulled a vial from her pouch, a dark brew of poppy, nightshade, and forbidden roots. She whispered incantations in a language older than the gods themselves. Jason watched as the snake's great head began to droop, its coils loosening. "Quickly," she hissed. Jason crept forward, every muscle tight with fear. The serpent stirred, its tongue flickering. Jason froze. Medea sang a low thrumming note, weaving the beast deeper into sleep. With hands steady as stone, Jason climbed the roots of the oak. The fleece hung just above him, golden threads dancing in a breeze that wasn't there. It pulsed with power, almost alive. He reached out. The moment his fingers touched the fleece, a jolt ran through him. Pure force, raw and ancient. But he held firm, wrenching it free from the branch. The forest seemed to awaken. A great groan rose from the trees. Birds burst from the canopy in a panic. Somewhere distant, horns sounded. The alarm. "They know," Medea cried. Jason leapt down, the fleece clutched tight. Together they sprinted through the trees, branches clawing at their skin. Behind them, the serpent thrashed, roused and enraged. Torches flared among the trees. Guards shouted, steel rang against steel. Jason and Medea burst from the forest into open ground. The river glinted ahead. The Argo waited, anchors raised, oars ready. "Argonauts," Jason bellowed, waving the fleece high. A roar of welcome met them. Hercules hurled a line to Jason, who caught it and swung aboard. Medea followed, nimble as a cat. "Row!" Jason shouted. The Argo surged into motion, cutting the water with fierce strokes. Arrows rained down from the shore, some striking the deck, others splashing harmlessly into the river. Aetes himself stood at the river's mouth, his face a mask of rage, his army behind him. "You will not escape," he screamed. Medea raised her arms, chanting words sharp as knives. The river boiled. Thick mist rolled out, blinding the archers. The Argo vanished into the fog, slipping away like a ghost. Behind them, Colchis burned with fury. Ahead, the open sea waited, and all the perils it still held. But for now, Jason held the Golden Fleece in his hands, and for the first time, the dream felt real. The Argo cut through the mist like a blade through cloth. Every oar stroke a beat of defiance against the fate snapping at their heels. Behind them, the city of Colchis raged. Torches flared along the riverbanks. War drums pounded, and the shouts of soldiers chased them across the water. Jason stood at the stern, the Golden Fleece slung across his shoulders like a mantle of fire. Medea was beside him, her hair whipped by the wind, eyes scanning the shore for danger. "They will not stop," she said grimly. "My father has sworn it." The Argonauts rowed until their arms ached and their lungs burned. But Colchis was not finished. From the docks, a fleet of warships launched, sleek black-hulled vessels, each bristling with armed men. "More coming," shouted Castor, perched in the rigging. Jason gritted his teeth. They couldn't outrun the Colchian ships on oars alone. They needed a plan. Medea stepped forward, a sharp glint in her eyes. "There is one way." She spoke quickly. A spell of storms, a summoning of the restless spirits of the sea. But it required blood, a sacrifice to the old gods that ruled the deep. Before Jason could ask who or what, Medea had already cut a shallow line across her palm with a dagger. Her blood dripped into the sea, and she chanted words that twisted the air into knots. The skies answered. Dark clouds boiled into existence. Winds howled from nowhere. The sea itself reared up, smashing against the pursuing ships. Thunder cracked so loud it shook the very planks beneath their feet. The Colchian fleet faltered. Some ships capsized, others broke apart on hidden reefs. "Row," Jason shouted. "Now!" The Argo surged forward, riding the chaos Medea had unleashed. They cut through the storm, while behind them, Colchis tore itself apart. For hours they sailed through rain and roaring winds, until at last the skies began to clear, and the seas settled into uneasy calm. The Argonauts collapsed to the deck, exhausted but alive. Jason wrapped the fleece tighter around his shoulders, the golden light a small sun against the grey. Medea slumped beside him, pale but triumphant. "We are not safe yet," she whispered. "Others will come. My father's wrath will chase us across the world." Jason nodded. He knew the road home would be as perilous as the road that had brought them here. But for now, the Argo sailed free, and the fleece was theirs, and nothing, not kings, not storms, not gods, would take it from them without a fight. The sea was vast and treacherous, and the gods, angered by Medea's betrayal and Jason's theft, hurled trial after trial at the Argo's path. Days blurred into nights filled with lashing rain, monstrous storms, and strange lands where hostile kings and vengeful spirits barred their way. On the island of Circe, the witch goddess, Medea's own bloodkin, performed dark rites to cleanse Jason and Medea of the blood guilt that tainted them. Circe warned them that no absolution could shield them from the gods' full judgment forever. They left her island with heavy hearts, their spirits darkened by the cost of survival. Beyond Circe, they faced the jagged rocks of Scylla and Charybdis, where water spun in hungry maelstroms. It was through Orpheus's divine music, plucked in desperation, that they lulled the savage seas long enough to slip through. And when they passed the caverns of the Sirens, it was Orpheus again who played so sweetly that even the most love-lost sailor kept his wits. At every turn, the Argonauts fought, bargained, and clung to life by the narrowest edge. Some of the crew grew sick, others grew restless, and mutinous whispers stirred in the dark. Only Jason's leadership and Medea's grim magic kept them moving toward home. At last, after endless hardship and near despair, the coastline of Iolcus appeared, golden under the setting sun. It looked smaller than Jason remembered, frailer, but no less precious. Jason felt his heart seize with a terrible mix of hope and dread. This was the home he had fought and bled for, the kingdom promised to him by birth and blessed by gods. The Argo entered the harbour, a battered silhouette against the bright water. Fishermen and townsfolk gathered, pointing and shouting as the Golden Fleece caught the last rays of daylight. News spread faster than wildfire. Bells rang, and the people surged from their homes to witness the impossible. Jason and the Argonauts marched through the city gates, bearing the fleece high. Their armor shone, but their faces were lined with hardship and memory. The crowds cheered, a storm of voices rising into the evening air. Yet beyond the acclamation, the true battle awaited. In the palace, Peleus sat grim-faced on his stolen throne, his hands trembling slightly as he clenched the arms of his chair. The colour drained from his cheeks when he saw Jason leading a force of living legends, the Golden Fleece a blazing banner of victory. Jason confronted him in the great hall, the Argonauts lined behind him like a wall of steel and fire. "I have fulfilled your challenge," Jason said, his voice sharp as a drawn sword. "I claim the throne that is mine by right." Peleus laughed, a thin, rattling sound full of fear and mockery. "A fleece does not make a king," he spat, trying to draw strength from his dying pride. "You are nothing but a boy, led by witchcraft and luck." The hall tensed like a drawn bow. Hands drifted to sword hilts. The smell of blood hung unspoken in the air. Medea stepped forward. "Then let the gods judge," she said, her voice ringing clear. From within her cloak, she produced a small cauldron, setting it before the throne. She filled it with water and herbs, muttering spells that made the very stones of the hall seem to hum. She promised to restore Peleus's youth if he dared to prove his faith in the gods and their justice. Skeptical but bound by the eyes of his court, Peleus agreed. At Medea's whispered instructions, he ordered his daughters to carry out the ritual, to slash their father's aging body and cast it into the cauldron to be reborn anew. They obeyed. Steel flashed. Blood spilled. The king's body was torn apart and hurled into the seething brew. But no miracle followed. No new youth rose from the cauldron. Only the stench of death filled the hall. Peleus was dead. The people gasped, fear and awe tightening their throats. Jason stood unmoved, grim and resolute. Without Peleus, the city trembled, leaderless. Loyalists to Jason stepped forward, pledging fealty. Others fled, afraid of the judgment they had escaped for too long. Jason took the throne that day, the Golden Fleece hanging in the palace above him. Yet the victory was bitter. Blood had been the price. Trust had been shattered. Jason and Medea ruled for a time, and under their hands, Iolcus knew prosperity. But the shadow of their deeds never faded. The gods, slow to anger but slower still to forgive, marked them. Their fates would twist and wither in the years to come. Yet for that moment, standing beneath the open sky with the Golden Fleece billowing in the wind, Jason was a hero. The dream had been won, and every dream, no matter how bright, must one day wake.